Well, you know, we've talked so much about Thanksgiving in recent weeks, specifically how much it's going to cost this year. But you know what's priceless? Food poisoning. Let's avoid it, all right? Let's make sure you and your family are safe for your Thanksgiving feast, because that is costly if you've got to miss time after work with food poisoning. Joining me now, Meredith Carruthers from the USDA. She's a food safety expert coming from Washington, D.C. here on Zoom to talk about some common mistakes people make. Meredith, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks. Good morning and happy almost Thanksgiving.
And happy almost Thanksgiving to you. First things first, I want to talk about probably a mistake people make in terms of food safety before they're even serving the food. There's all sorts of problems you can run into when you're just trying to prepare the food. What are some of the most common ones?
Yeah, so some of the biggest things are, thawing improperly, stuffing improperly, not using a food thermometer. So there are a few things there that people don't tend to do correctly that can lead to foodborne illness. So as we're getting very close to Thanksgiving, I know most people who have had a frozen turkey are probably already in the thawing process, but if your turkey is still somewhat frozen, please do not thaw at room temperature. Don't put it on the counter. That's not going to hold it at a safe temperature and can potentially cause that foodborne illness bacteria to multiply to dangerous levels. So biggest thing is don't use your counter or room temperature to thaw your turkey.
I'm sure a lot of people out there heard you say that, Meredith, and said, what's the difference? If I cook it to temperature, isn't that going to take care of all the bacteria? What's the answer to that?
So unfortunately, it might not, which is the scary thing. We can't see, smell, or visually, detect if foodborne illness-causing bacteria are there. And sometimes if bacteria are allowed to multiply to certain levels, they can actually produce heat-resistant toxins that then won't be killed by the cooking process. So that's why the 2-hour rule, not leaving foods at room temperature, is very important.
Talk to me about stuffing the turkey safely. I was somewhat surprised to find out it's something that you generally discourage.
Correct. So we generally discourage it just because it can create a safety concern. However, there are ways to do it safely. So we do have some of those tips if you are going to stuff, to do it safely. One of the biggest things is we don't recommend stuffing it before you're going to cook it. So it's best to stuff it right before you're going to put it in that oven. Stuff it loosely so it's not as, packed tight. It'll cook thoroughly and in an appropriate amount of time and not be a concern. The biggest concern with stuffing is that you're putting warm stuff inside a poultry, cavity where there's raw juices and bacteria, and that can create quite an environment that bacteria like. So you just want to make sure you're stuffing it only right before you're going to cook it. And then you have to use your food thermometer to check the inside of the stuffing, the center of the stuffing as well, to make sure it's reached 165 degrees.
165. Once you're set, you're there. Okay, now let's talk about cooling it down. I was asking you in the commercial break. A lot of people have big crock pots full of casseroles. They're a little reticent to just shove them right into the refrigerator. What's the proper protocol there?
I know it's tempting to just put your stuff right into the fridge, as it is in its big casserole dish or your crock pot crock, but it's really important to make sure you're breaking down your leftovers into smaller portions. If you put that big, crock pot or that, big casserole dish right into the fridge, your food isn't going to cool in a proper and safe amount of time. It'll take way too long, can create foodborne illness causing bacteria issues. So you want to break it down into smaller containers, shallow containers. That'll help them cool faster and more properly.
Last question, super quick. How long are the leftovers good for?
4 days. So if you're cooking this Thursday on Thanksgiving Day, you want to set a calendar reminder for yourself for Monday. Otherwise, they can pop them in the freezer and they'll stay safe indefinitely, but best quality for about 2 to 6 months.
There you go. Meredith Carruthers, thank you so much. We always talk about a great sort of inventive ways to use Thanksgiving leftovers. You need them because we got a lot of food we've got to eat quickly before it goes bad. Thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C. this morning. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Happy Thanksgiving.
And happy almost Thanksgiving to you, Meredith.